Welcome to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show. Now, our conversation today will focus on World Backup Day, what data means for businesses and firms, and the future of corporate data management. Now, to shed the expert lens on that, we have Matthew Hardman. He's the Chief Technology Officer, Asia Pacific for Hitachi Vantara, a subsidiary of Hitachi Limited. Now, with that, welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Brian. It's awesome to be here.
Now, Matt, for a start, give us an overview of Hitachi Vantara. That Hitachi is an old name. Tell us a little bit about the company, how it's evolved, and what you do with the organization.
Yeah, thanks for that. The Hitachi is, over 100 years old. It started off obviously in Japan, where it created the first Japanese domestic motor or engine in a mining town. And from there, the company has, really diversified into a large number of different organizations, I guess. You would probably see when you walk around, you see Hitachi all over the place. You might see a Hitachi constructing backhoe, digging holes. You might be in an elevator and see Hitachi. You'll see it on rice cookers, a whole range of different things. So it is a company which is very, very heavily invested in kind of operational technology in every part of our lives, which is very, very exciting for us. But we also, the part that I'm actually a part of is Hitachi Vantara. And this is really the data infrastructure part of our company, where we build and develop enterprise scalable infrastructure to help customers run the most critical systems, from mainframe to Oracle databases to cloud, all these different types of things. And I can tell you, if I can, one of the most coolest things that I've seen us do as a company, we've actually built data centers in ways that no one actually ever seen before. If you look at some of the trains in Europe, those are Hitachi built trains, but they're actually data centers on wheels, monitoring operationally every second how that train's working, the capacity, the performance. This is a company which really takes operational technology and fuses with informational technology to build incredible experiences.
Now, that's a very interesting story, especially because I think the buzzword around in the last couple of years is really this mushrooming of data centers, particularly around the Asia Pacific region. They've stopped building data centers in Singapore, obviously because of resource constraints. Tell us a little bit about how Hitachi is involved in that space.
So in terms of actually working with customers to help with data centers, right? There is this typical trend where you sort of see people say, I've got to move everything to cloud, right? It's kind of like the hip thing to go ahead and actually do. But at the same time, as I speak to customers across Asia Pacific, there is also this recognition that, hey, maybe I'm not necessarily getting the benefits I was promised. It is quite costly and I've had some challenges and maybe I don't have skills. They want that sort of economies of scale. They want to be able to reduce the impact of what they're doing in their own data centers. What we're able to do with the innovations that we drive in our technology platforms is we're able to, with each generation, compress data better, store it in smaller infrastructure components. We're able to make it much more energy efficient. Like, if I give you an example, over time, I guess the last 3 generations of our storage arrays, we've reduced carbon or greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. Like, that's a significant impact for customers who have green sustainability. So we are constantly looking at what is it that we do with every layer of a customer's infrastructure to be able to help them scale down, reduce, but absolutely not impact things like performance, data protection, reliability, all those different things. We recognize that we have an incredible responsibility as being part of that platform for a customer's data. We cannot be the risk in their operation. So we really hold ourselves accountable. And that Japanese engineering for the technology we have to make sure that we do not fail is absolutely core to what we go ahead and actually do. So we've been working with customers to look at how do you retire older infrastructure, modernize that data infrastructure for something that's more efficient, more sustainable, and ultimately deliver higher performance.
And this resonates, I'm sure, with this message that you've just shared resonates with a lot of companies, because one of the key challenges that CEOs and the C-suites face across the world, and particularly in the Asia Pacific region now, is really to be with the whole focus on ESG and ESG compliance is really about reducing carbon footprint. And with the explosion of data, the new oil, obviously the carbon footprint, instead of reducing the carbon footprint in the short run, it's actually led to a bigger impact on the of each company's carbon footprints. How do you see that impacting the way we do business moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's when you think about the data problem, right? I don't want to say the data problem. I love the comment you talk about the data being the new oil, data being gold. I've heard this quite often. The other thing which I sort of think about it now, and you would have seen this in the news just yesterday, I was reading that companies in pursuit of AI, I don't want to say dominance, I want to say competitive advantage. They are now starting to sort of say, hey, we're running out of data to consume and operationalize our learning models or our language models. So now they're starting to generate what they say is synthetic data to feed back into those AI models. So it's not actual data, it's synthetic. And then you start thinking about this and going, well, where am I going to go ahead and store this? How am I going to go ahead and actually protect it? What do I do with it? And if you lay that on top with where people want to run AI, people want to say run it in the cloud, maybe want to run some stuff on premise. One of the big challenges you start to see is people having data all over the place, right? They say, I have to have data here. I have to have a copy of the data here. I have to move it here. Maybe if we go back to that concept of data being the new oil, maybe we need to think about data being consumed, not just stored. So what I mean by that is if I needed to move data to the cloud, but I created that data on premise, can I move it to the cloud, get it to do what it's meant to do, produce an AI model, produce some sort of analysis, something, and then delete it, right? People have this real hesitation to delete data. But if you really are managing your data well, you can say, hey, I've got that on premise. I've got it protected. I've got it labeled. This is also very important as well. But I have that repository of information I can utilize for all my use cases. And where I use it, I can destroy it after I'm done with it. And that helps customers from a couple of different things. One, reduces costs. You're not duplicating data all over the place. You've got one single source. Two, maybe you're going to manage regulation about where data actually is, utilize it, get rid of it, get your outcome. And three, as you sort of point, how do I reduce the ESG impact by having too much data being out there? So we need to really rethink our data strategies and the way we think about data. Maybe it is a resource to be consumed and destroyed, not necessarily stored all over the place.
Now, Matthew, so this is a very interesting thing because now I read somewhere that in a previous Hitachi Vantara survey of business leaders expect that data volumes will double by 2025. Now, you and I are old enough to remember how expensive it was to store data. We were not talking about terabytes, we were talking about not gigabytes, but megabytes, roomfuls of tape drive machines and so forth. And during that time, because things were so expensive, chief technology officers used to be very cognizant of what data was actually archived, what was actually in the kept, and what was actually purged in the end, and how they were different ways that we even archived our data depending on the cost of it. Perhaps this is an interesting concept that perhaps, which is what you are suggesting, needs to be revisited because, as you said, nobody's throwing out anything. Everyone's scared to purge data or delete data.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges. And sometimes I think there's, when you talk about, when people say storage, they kind of use it as a very generic term. And the challenge is data is not data, right? It's not like saying, when I talk about my children, I don't say my kids. I typically will say Oscar and Sarah, and each one of them has their own characteristics and personality. Data is the same thing, right? Your data that you actually are storing in an Oracle database probably resides in a really good system like a block storage system. Like that's your sort of hardcore, super reliable storage system. But then as we see more and more organizations who are starting to retain, we haven't spoken about this for a long time, but IoT data. Remember, like it kind of feels like we've forgotten about AI. Like IoT was hot, and then Now it's all about AI, but IoT is a great example. You've got all of these machines, maybe in a factory, it could be just general information from a building, but they're creating millions and millions and millions of little files that you want to go ahead and actually store. Or, I'll give you a third one, we're using video cameras to capture more information than ever. I was in China a couple of weeks ago, and I was fascinated looking at how many video cameras were around the place. And I went back to research, and they said it's something like 600 video cameras per square kilometer in China. I'm sure I've got that number wrong, but it was more dense than New York, right? And New York was a place where you sort of think has lots of video cameras. So all of these different systems, these different applications have different types of data characteristics. And so you've got to think about this in different ways. I mean, you sort of talked about archive, right? And sometimes people confuse archive and backup, right? Backup is good for that sort of Oracle database, that sort of operational stuff. But when you start to think about the video, these are very, very large files, right? Backup's probably not necessarily the way you want to protect it. Maybe you do want to look at an archive. And, looking at technology like object storage, right? So we talked about Oracle databases running on block, but video stores and images and all those things that you'll probably use to power AI, object storage is probably a technology which is something you really need to consider investing in, because that gives you a much greater economy of scale, huge aspects of storage capacity, because you're looking with large files. And one other thing which I think is really interesting, it also gives you a mutability of data, which kind of means when you write it once into that archive store, it can never be changed. Now that gives you benefit from a point of view of retention. But if you think about things like ransomware can't even go after that sort of stuff, right? Because it can't be written over, it can't be deleted, yes. It can't be written over, it can't be held. So if your data, like, and this is coming back to the data being the new oil, the gold, if your data is what is giving you that competitive advantage, especially as you start to think about, I need to have the best AI model, and that data you're training on is not necessarily a transactional database, but it's images and video and those sorts of things, then that is the stuff you think hackers and what would you call them, threat actors would be going after. They want to go ahead and actually hit those things, but immutable storage gives you that extra level of protection for that data. So organizations, when they think about their data strategy, right, there's a whole range of different things. It's what type of data I have, how are we going to use it, what systems or architecture should we store them on, and then you have the onset effect of how do I get access to it, what sort of speed do I need access to, how do I protect it. It's a complicated space, but the great thing is, we sort of say, hey, what's Hitachi doing? We have those sorts of solutions to be able to help customers, usher them through that data journey.
Now, we just had World Backup Day on the 31st of March.
Mm.
And, as basic as it is in this conversation, some companies still don't do the basics right. In your view, what is the significance of this day, especially in today's data-driven world?
Yeah, I think it serves as a reminder that once you try there's no single right backup process, right? You don't do it once and you go, well, we're good now. Let's just walk away and everything will be fine. The natural evolution of data has required us to constantly go back and check, is this still relevant? Is this still working the right way? Do we need to look at ways to make this more operationally efficient? And so, having a moment to say, oh, it's World Backup Day, we should go ahead and actually think about it. And maybe it's probably not in the calendars of most CIOs, but you do need to start thinking about, how do I ensure that I'm continually looking at this as part of my critical infrastructure or services that our organization runs? Because this is the stuff which separates us from everybody else. I almost laugh when I think about World Backup Day. It's like, okay, World Backup Day, this is a day we have to remember that we need backup. It's like Valentine's Day. This is the day I'm meant to remind myself I love my wife. I need to tell myself that every day, and if I'm not, she's going to whack me, or I should be whacking myself. But same thing with the World Backup Day. You've got to keep thinking about this. You've got to keep saying, as we add more systems, as we add more capabilities in our organization, are our protection strategies set up to look after it? That's what it is. And so it's that that punch in the face that goes, hey, have we checked it out? Are we okay?
Now, given that context now, this is we're the start of the second year, 2024. What are some of the key trends that CIOs should be watching out for?
Look, I think there's, in terms of trends that they're watching out for, there's always going to be that growth of data, right? So that's undeniable, right? There's going to be more parts of their organization which are going to say to them, hey, we need to capture more. We need to have more insights on this. I need more of this. They're going to need to understand that their data platform or their data portfolio is going to change fairly dramatically, right? And start to change very quickly, right? Especially as we start to bring in more services. I mean, we've already seen this when people started talking about cloud, right? Cloud was one of those moments in time where it wasn't that, oh, cloud's here. Now the IT department will get cloud and they will issue it out to the users like a laptop. What really happened was the guys in the marketing team went, this stuff is cool. Where's my credit card, my corporate card? Let me go ahead and start consuming it. And all of a sudden we had this concept of shadow IT coming in, and IT departments kind of going, well, how do I fix this? How do I manage this? Right. And it was quite painful, and it started to get back into where they were going. I think we're on this same situation happening again, especially driven by AI. But a lot of these applications and services are so much more accessible than they ever have been before. The end user is much more educated. They're much more marketed to. So they're going to start demanding these services. And if you don't give them to them, they're just going to start using them. And so the CEO is going to have to deal with this sort of data deluge that's actually going to go through from that angle.
But I want to stop you there, because
please.
You alluded to a key problem is resources are not infinite. So I'm a CIO. I've got this explosion of data. We talked about it earlier in the conversation, also around the fact that I cannot be throwing money at more and more storage capability or backup capability and so forth.
Yeah.
What advice would you be giving CIOs looking to maximize their investments in data storage and backup infrastructure?
Yeah, this is the conversation we have all the time, right? I think it starts by simply recognizing or acknowledging what we've been talking about. Data is not equal, right? There's no such thing as data anymore, right? It is since the days of people moving off a mainframe to, client server applications or 3-tier applications, they get more and more complex. Data became more varied, right? That in itself is the first level of acknowledgement that people need to understand. And once you start to understand that the data has variability, then you need to start being able to work out what is the right ways to approach it. Like, the conversation about object storage, right, as an approach. Mm-hmm. Do you need to go ahead and put, I don't know, 1 billion images into block storage? You talk about costs and resources. That's just such an inefficient use of that storage. But maybe it's because people didn't understand that they kind of had a choice of different architectures that they could go ahead and actually utilize. A billion objects would be better in an object storage, right? Not in a transactional database. Yes. When you think about the protection of that, I need to sort of think about, okay, what are the systems I need to get up and running first when I have a situation going on? Which ones do I need to have the high level protection? It's going to be probably those systems of record, transactional systems that are running the business on a daily operation. The ability to recover images, maybe not so much. One of the areas which I always get sort of concerned about is how much do general users store their personal information on corporate assets and kind of expect that corporates should back that up and protect it and things like that as well, right? I've seen it happen. It's scary. So I think CIOs need to take a very, not say heavy hand, but really drive diligence in sort of saying, okay, have I really understood what my data strategy is? Do I understand how I'm collecting, storing, and potentially protecting? There is that layer of how we're utilizing it, right? And that utilization becomes a bit of a challenge because sometimes you start to see that duplication of data in different spaces. I'm glad that we have technologies that help us with data compression and deduplication. So the technology, the storage technology itself is smart enough to look at data and kind of go, hey, you know what? this bit of data is the same as this bit of data. Well, we can just have one copy of it and we'll point it back. So to the user, it doesn't look like it's moved. It's still there. It's just the storage is smart enough to understand what's going on. So I think CIOs need a data strategy. They definitely need to look at modernizing your infrastructure because those capabilities is super important. And then designing a very smart sort of protection strategy is probably really critical on that.
Matt, it's been a great conversation. I've learned a lot. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess if we were sort of talking about that aspect of World Backup Day and thinking about data protection, look, data is very, very important to me. I always think about all of these different evolving workloads and capabilities. And yes, AI is a great conversation that people are having right now. But even that, the differentiators for AI and all those different things is still data. So organizations to prepare for the future, like what comes after AI? Data is going to power that next generation workload as well, right? And so ensuring that customers take a moment sometimes to maybe slow things down a little bit on the front end, the application, and think about what is our data strategy, how are we collecting, how are we storing, how are we protecting. That's the one thing I'd actually ask a lot of CIOs to do. Have a thought for the actual infrastructure providing you the value to power those next generation applications.
Matt, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you, sir. I really enjoyed being here. I love having a chat with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've been speaking to Matthew Hardman. He's the APAC Chief Technology Officer for Hitachi Vantara. I'm Brian Fernandez, and you've been watching and listening to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.